Gautam, thank you so much for being here for this session of Ops Matters. Right, we have an important set of topics to discuss. Links very closely. How operations sort of is not just operations, but it's really the backbone of the business, and what implications it has on a company's ability to grow and to scale. Right now, we've obviously done our best to let the community know who you are, what you've done and why we were so excited to have you here. But maybe we kick off a little bit with some quick background about yourself, what you've been up to in the last few years, and maybe also tell the audience a little bit about what BeatO is and what BeatO does. Right, I think that'd be a great starting point to ground the conversation, and then we take it from there into the specific topics. So over to you, Gautam.
Sure. So, first of all, a very good morning to all of you, and I'm glad that somebody is awake on a Sunday morning listening to this. Hopefully, interesting and exciting session. But thank you, Rohit and so for bringing me in. Just a quick note on my background, pretty conventional one. I'm an engineer by qualification, worked in consulting for a while, then did my MBA from the Indian School of Business at Hyderabad, graduated in a pretty bad year, 2009. If I think most of you may have been in school at that time, but it was a pretty bad year of an economic downturn starting kicking off. Was among the fortunate few to have got a great placement. I moved to Europe to work with the Lufthansa Group, which some of you may know already. It's the one of the largest commercial aviation groups in the world. I think that is where my grounding and the learning for ops began. I spent almost 8 years in different parts of the Lufthansa group, from commercial functions to operation functions to maintenance, repair, and overall, and everything, because I was part of this global, rotation management program. So it allowed me to see operations at the core and at the front end, and so those 8 years were really, really beneficial. Of course, eventually I ended up, leading joint ventures and mergers and acquisitions for Lufthansa. Before deciding to come back to start BeatO in 2015. So this year we'll celebrate we'll be almost a decade old, building and scaling BeatO. But BeatO really began from a personal pain point. Unfortunately, I was in my early 30s when I was diagnosed with diabetes, an HbA1c level, if some of you may know, close to about 6.4, 6.5. So just about on the borderline, but wanted to do something to be able to take control of my own health. And then when I was back in India, bumped into a friend of mine from school who's now my co-founder at BeatO. He had been actually diagnosed with pretty serious diabetes around the same time. And when we started digging deeper, we realized that fundamentally the challenge and with most problem statements in India is not just about the volume. For instance, in India there are about 100 million people who have diabetes, who have been diagnosed with diabetes, and these are, recently these numbers came up in the ICMR data. But the real challenge is that 80% of them actually have uncontrolled diabetes. And when you start digging deeper, you realize it's a classical ops problem, because when you start to look at why is this such a grave situation, that while we have 100 million population, and it's always going to be very difficult to reach every nick and corner of India without good solid ops, it's also pertinent that we solve for the fact that 80% of them have uncontrolled diabetes, or are on the, I would say, pretty much a ticking time bomb. When we realized there were fundamentally three topics which were causing this. One was access. So almost 80% or 90% of specialists, for instance, lived in metro cities, and doctors were living in metro cities, but the patient population is growing in tier 2, 3 and rural areas of India. And but access is not just a problem of supply and demand, and this is where I want to come in terms of ops. It's also the fact that for instance, I don't know how many of you might be in Delhi, Mumbai, or Bangalore, these busy cities. Just getting to a doctor is an ordeal, right? In Delhi, if I have to go to Medanta, which is a prominent hospital here, I'll spend almost an hour and a half in the car just to reach Medanta. Then I'll spend about 20-25 minutes just getting to the elevator because it's such a long queue. And then, the doctor might make me wait for a couple of hours and then see me for a couple of minutes, and then I'm back, heading home, and going through that again, Herculean traffic and everything else. And so it actually builds in an inertia. And now, transport this situation to a rural area of India. This is, we're talking of Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Hyderabad, Pune, etc. But if you transport this to a small town of India, and I work now a lot in rural areas and the tehsils of India, uh, the nearest specialist is about 150 200 kilometers away. So they are typically in a division. Then you have a district, then a tehsil, and then a gaon. So this individual has to actually give up if he wants to go and see a good doctor for treating their diabetes, which is becoming a little serious. They have to travel all the way, let's say from a small town like Magroni to all the way to a Gwalior. If I take the example of MP, and that itself is an opportunity cost, because this person is mostly a farmer or a shopkeeper. They will shut their shop, they will have time away from their farm, they'll go spend the whole day. They will unfortunately have transportation cost, consultation costs. Sorry, my son is, I gave him the task of making coffee for me. So this access, and the fact that there's so much of inertia, whether you're in a big city or in a small town, creates procrastination, and people don't end up going and seeing the doctor unless it becomes really really bad. So this is one problem of access. The second one is, of course, why, when I told you about the 80% problem statement of uncontrolled diabetes, the second one is of awareness and continuity of education, because diabetes is not something that is going to get treated or cured on day one. It's a continuous learning process. It's how, in business we continuously improve on ourselves, in our business and in ops. It's the same what we want to do with our bodies, right? And as you graduate from one level to the other, I'm sure many of you play video games, you'll have to develop new skills, you'll have to set new goals, you'll have to create better efficiencies, and hence this continuity of awareness and education also makes a hell of a lot of importance in terms of adherence. And again, why I'm giving you this context, because eventually when I tell you, everything boils down to ops, and how efficient ops drives all these things. And finally, it's about affordability, guys. In India, everything, and more so unfortunately in health, as some of you may have noticed, affordability of healthcare determines how adherence of healthcare takes place. Unfortunately, diabetes and chronic conditions, nobody pays for these. You pay out of your own pocket. There's no insurance provider. There's typically no one footing your bill, unlike, let's say, in the West. And hence, people who are on medication, even over a period of time, because of simply the expense of medication, they fall off the medication. They won't get diagnostics done frequently enough, because it's going to cost some money. And hence, when you look at these three A's which I just told you about: access, awareness, and affordability, these three need to be tackled effectively to be able to control diabetes. And this is really what we signed up for 10 years back. And I would definitely say, when I look back at the journey of the last 10 years, we've been able to crack a lot of these problems, and which have contributed to both the scale and the efficiency that BeatO's been able to drive by reaching 25, close to 2.5 million or 25 lakh customers across 30,000 pin codes of India. So that's a little longer monologue than I was expecting to introduce both myself and BeatO.
Awesome, Gautam. Thank you so much. I think I know that Shogato definitely resonated with what you said, right? Because he not only worked at Medanta, but he also happens to be a gamer, right? Um, with that, right, we jump into the first segment, which is to try and understand, right, what is the linkage between operations and scale? Like you said, 2.5 million people, 30,000 pin codes, complex condition. Clearly, it's a difficult challenge, right, to meet, and yet the company does it. And for all of y'all who are here, if you ever go to LinkedIn and you see what people have to say about BeatO, clearly customers also love the product, they love the service, and it's really doing them some good. So maybe jumping into the first segment, like couple of questions, right? One, when you think about operations or operations excellence, right? What does it mean in the context of a business like BeatO, which is in the healthcare space? And tagging on to that, a lot of people, when they observe the product or they know about it, they think of it, as a digital health business, which it is. But often the people and the operational aspect that happens in the background is not obvious, right, to somebody looking at it for the first time from the outside in. So maybe tell us a little bit about, what role ops and people play at BeatO, right? So what is ops to you? What is ops in healthcare, in that context? And then what role does ops play in BeatO? Maybe we start with that and then get into some of the other questions.
Yeah, I think in that short sentence or paragraph, you asked me a lot of questions and insightful ones too. But maybe I'll begin with just saying that you cannot scale chaos, because you said how does ops help in scaling? I think first of all, if there is a chaotic process, there is no use of scaling that. Unfortunately, I've done the mistake several times in the past of doing that, but realized time and again that there is no fun in doing it, and you're causing every stakeholder in that equation unnecessary heartache. So I think hence for us, what is very critical is we get things right first and then scale. And healthcare, while you look at BeatO, and some of you may be familiar with it, it's actually a digital care ecosystem for everything diabetes at the center of the universe. It might appear there's an app, and then there are different pillars around it. Our remote monitoring through our these connected devices. I can show you a couple of them. Once the data comes in, then this is an ops in itself, and I'm going to talk about it in some time. But this small little device, while it just appears that this is small and just plugs into the phone, and then you start monitoring your sugar levels, it leads to a massive operational solve that we needed to have for BeatO. But essentially, remote monitoring being one element, of course, then virtual coaching through and the doctor consultations being the second. The entire commerce layer of BeatO, where we have a curated shop and ecosystem, and finally making sure medicines get delivered to an individual on time, their adherence is proper. It's the whole loop that a person, 360-degree loop, that we needed to have built, so that this individual who may be a diabetic and comes into the ecosystem, from ensuring remote monitoring, ensuring they get the right continuity of awareness and education, getting the right diagnosis and treatment from our doctors and coaches, which is all virtual, ensuring that all their supplies reach them at home, and do it in a way that is very affordable for the individual. You can imagine, is not only tech, right? It is fueled by tech, and of course the interfacing has to be product, because that makes the whole experience much more simpler and effective. But there's a whole background of operations built around it. So when just this device, just making sure that every time you insert it, there's an IMEI code, and we are able to actually get the information of the patient, so that then if from the time it leaves our warehouse. So let's say you buy this device, and the when the warehouse is shipping this device, the barcode is scanned, we know exactly whose house it has reached, so that we can give them the right customer experience, right? So, and then once they start monitoring, we know who this customer is, when they bought this device, what troubles they may have had in terms of that entire logistics of the device itself, and then were they able to activate. So some older people, let's say 60-65-year-old, may have some issues in connecting this device and utilizing them, to ensuring that they're actively monitoring and then handing over, if the intervention, if somebody's sugar levels go up or down, through the care team, which is our coaches and the team of doctors, to ensuring that then when the supplies are running out, we refill them proactively through our warehouses, to ensuring the customer support is available when, as and when the individual needs, to ensuring finally this whole health, this entire loop is driving what eventually for us, health outcomes for an individual, right? So that's the golden metric that we chase. But it can't be done if you don't have all these inputs, and every input that we're talking about is actually got an operations layer to it. And I can give you many examples, but just this process of ensuring, for instance, this device reaches a person within a couple of days, or the strips, when you're using this device, there are these test strips, and they run out, and ensuring that by the time the person's strips are running out, they receive these, because that has a major ramification in the adherence. So it's like, you all use toothpaste, right? And when it's about to run out, you will squeeze it till the very end, and you'll maybe, पहले आप जब I can switch to Hindi, no,
Yeah,
occasionally.
you can
So,
do it however you like.
when you put the toothpaste when it's full, then you'll normally see कि पूरा भरते हो आप, और फिर जब कम होता रहता है तो थोड़ा थोड़ा होता रहता है, इन द सेंस वो क्वार्टर, वो जो ब्रिसल्स होते हैं उसके क्वार्टर पे आप भरते हो. So it's the same way here. If you run out of strips or you run out of medication, uh, you may lose the patient's adherence, which actually has a consequence on outcome. So, hence, having a very seamless operation and tying everything and delivering that experience, of course, through an interface, which is our app, and utilizing technology to be able to tie all these elements of the operation so they come together for a customer to deliver customer excellence, to deliver health outcomes, and of course for the business, eventually efficiency translating into profitability. I think it's everything that needs to work together. You can't have problems getting solved in isolation. Of course, now again, Rome was never built in one day, so it's not going to be that you will solve everything on day one. But your aspiration to be able to do that and solve quickly is what differentiates or separates businesses who will eventually do grow significantly more than some of the others.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I think what you just said at the last is honestly the ethos with which Shogata and I wanted to start Ops Matters, right? Ki there was a difference that we saw between startups who scale and startups who don't. And a large part of that scalability aspect comes from being able to, you know, convert chaos into process, right? And be able to figure out stuff that can multiply and that can grow. And I think this is a fantastic example of that. On that line, right, now that you're coming up almost to a decade of BeatO, and obviously the company has evolved massively since you started to where it is today. Could you tell us a little about, when you went about designing some of these operational aspects, right? And when end up designing the customer experience, the goals that you set for the business, right? How did you sort of over time build the ops, to prepare for this sort of scale, right? And can you give us some examples of maybe what has changed, say 10 years ago, 5 years ago to today, as the business grew, as the complexities increased, how have operations evolved, and how should people think about designing their operations in the companies that they're working at or the problems that they're trying to solve today?
So I'll maybe answer that, Rohit, with two examples. One is, the BeatO virtual model, which we've been building over a period of time, and how, if I jog my memory back, several years ago to today, how that has scaled. And more recently, I mean, recent in the sense about 4 5 months back, we started our offline presence in terms of launching physical clinics in tehsils and smaller areas, and so that's actually in a very small startup journey of itself. And my learnings over the last several years, and perhaps having done things not the way they should have, but now translating, at least you're always more smarter in retrospect, to the clinics. I can tell you a little bit about how I'm going about doing things differently this time.
Awesome.
But the early days of, I would say, any organization, especially at BeatO, given healthcare eventually is going to be 80 90% operations. Any space you pick up, I don't think it's ever going to not have operation, and this is where you're building the moat as well, right? So while AI and app and everything is, like I said, very very important and useful, the moat at the back end is actually your operations and how you build efficiency into it. So the early days are important, but I, at least now that we are translating that knowledge onto the clinics, I prefer a lean ops. So I want to make sure that we're learning fast, and so operations is not necessarily being there's no fancy operations at this stage. It's just to ensure that what we need to do to be able to throw out important results, we understand what the critical inputs for those are. So for example, in the clinic setup, what we realized very quickly was that having clinics about 50 kilometers from a division makes a lot more sense. Having the doctor, however, come from 50 kilometers makes sense, because they don't actually have the doctor, but the doctor can't be too far off. But having clinics within, 40-50 kilometers of each other, make sure that one doctor can be utilized for a weekly OPD in clinic A, B, C, D, etc. Right. So but it, hence I wanted to keep it lean. Otherwise I could have we had the choice, and of course the capital is available to make sure that every clinic is manned with a doctor. But that wouldn't have been very prudent, because we would have ended up hiring many more doctors, and who knows, eventually it may not have worked out and we would have to request them to leave. But having in your early days very lean ops, so that you can learn fast, iterate fast. And I think even when I look at the clinics now and BeatO, 10 years ago, BeatO Sugar Clinics and BeatO as a digital solution 10 years ago, the early part of your ops has to be founder led, I think and believe, because it's many of the things are in your mind. You're actually the one who's absorbing everything from the field, from the research, etc. So you can't just outsource ops and say, okay, I'll hire an ops expert and they'll do it. So I feel lean ops is extremely important in the earlier days, and founder-led control is very, very crucial. But as you grow, and now perhaps now the 5-6 months of having had the experience of clinics, and when I jog my memory back a year or two of BeatO, SOPs start becoming important. Getting your field ops team who are very, very solid become important. Having tracking and dashboard becomes important. Like I said, now when we started off, we didn't have all the tracking of when we're sending the device, to whom are we sending the device, when they are starting to monitor, etc. But then in this phase we built up the tracking, and was so robust that we knew exactly what is happening. So I'll take the case of clinics again, because this is fresh in memory. Pretty much from when a customer comes in and registers with what we call our clinic coordinator, he has an app, to this patient walking in to meet the doctor, to then walking out, going home, to their content engagement journey, to their dietitian and virtual educator reaching out to them, everything is actually tracked. Is So the whole customer journey we have complete transparency and understanding on. And why it is important is because then you know where the drop offs might be happening, you know which are the customer cohorts who you want to focus on. It also throws out what are the important metrics that you must keep optimizing on. So for example, in our business in general, diabetes, right, patient retention and lifetime value is one of the most crucial things, because a person who's coming in, unless you engage with them over a period of time, you're not going to make much of a dent, neither in their health nor in their pockets. So it's eventually you will need to be able to make sure your dashboards, your tracking, and your SOPs, your field team is top notch. And then once you've established that, your baseline is pretty clear, your unit economics are well understood, that's the time then you can press on the accelerator, and then you scale both your business and your ops.
Got it. Awesome. No, this is super helpful. I think bunch of like very, very interesting nuggets across different, contexts of offline, digital, the entire piece, right? And I think it's super interesting to note like all of these different operational implications, right? Have a very clear, even though it's delivered digitally in a product format to the customer, the back-end operations here are having a very critical impact on that digital product experience, right?
Yeah.
And your ability to directly work closely with customers, right? So maybe diving a little bit deeper, right, into this aspect of customer experience, customer delight, right, especially in such a outcomes-driven business, right? Maybe we start a little bit with a first principles view, right? I'm sure it's an obvious thing, but it'd be great to get your take, right? Why do you think customer experience or customer delight is something that's so important, right? How does it like really help to shape the image of a company, a business, a brand? And why is it so critical for a company to succeed? And then maybe we jump a little bit more into trying to understand how you measure customer success, how you can impact customer success, right? How you train people to become customer centric in the company, and so on and so forth. But maybe we just start off with that first idea, right? Grounding it. Why is customer experience important? How does it shape a brand? Why is it essential for success?
Yeah, so I think, and I'm going to talk, and Rohit's been part of BeatO's journey for a period of time as well. So he will resonate with it when I tell you, and I'll be very open and candid of, the things we were doing and we needed to change to be able to be where we are today. But customer experience, I would say, in any business or any company is extremely important, but more so in healthcare because it's about trust and consistency, right? So, trust, if you lose once, it's going to be very difficult to regain, especially in healthcare because you're dealing with a person's health and eventual outcome. And consistency of your experience also matters because you can't have a shoddy experience and then a great one, and then another shoddy experience and a great one. It needs to be consistently good, right? When I look at especially our journey, and I can talk to you at length about customer experience, but I'll keep it quick and short. uh, we didn't realize the importance of customer experience early on in our journey, and so many of these things are coming from our learnings. We didn't really, unfortunately, have ops matter or such forums when we began, where we could get initial inputs and guidance, but we didn't design customer experience. I would say we designed for business at first, and then at ops, and then customer experience. I think it should have been the other way around. And especially now, any new initiative that we undertake or the previous ones which we are revamping have customer experience at the core. But I'll take the example of the devices, right? So what we did was, obviously there were always going to be pressures of revenue generations, etc. So as soon as and our ops weren't at that point in time designed to account for both scale as well as, and I'm talking on the digital core, maybe few years back, they weren't designed for scale. Neither they were designed for customer experience to be excelling. And as a result, we used to end up, let's say a person used to start monitoring. If you look at our reviews maybe 5 4 5 years back, and I'm sure Rohit would have as well in his diligence, we used to end up calling people and calling people to sell and calling people to do this and that. So there was hell of a lot of calling, but not segmented calling. There was no thought as much behind it. But then we took a step back. We said this is not what we were planning to build in the first place. So yes, it may cause a short term pain in terms of stepping down in terms of our growth or revenues, etc. But we want to fix, or we must fix our customer experience first, because forget about healthcare or anything. As a business, we stand for delivering a promise to the customers, and we worked really hard at it. So we brought down, pretty much we segmented, automated a lot of things. We made sure that we set up multiple warehouses across India to deliver. And I'm talking of several years back when BeatO was typically a remote monitoring and management of diabetes company. We uh, we did so many things that always centered around the customer, that in a short span of 7 8 9 months from when we began, we cut down on the calling. We started doing segmentation. We ensured that warehouses were set up. We ensured that every inch of a negative customer feedback was getting addressed proactively. We were acknowledging that there were mistakes on our side, solving for them, etc. We used to rank, if you look at these ratings on Amazon, etc., as one visible metric. We used to be around 3.8 or something sometime back for these devices. Today we are the best ranked monitoring solution at 4.4, and that's happened over a short, and we already have like had already thousands of ratings. So it was cumulatively not going to be easy to move from the needle from 3.8 to anywhere close to 4. But the team worked so hard that in a short span of 9 to 12 months, we were hovering around 4.1, 4.2, and then now if you look at it, close to 4.4, we are bestsellers, etc. And not just for the device, for the solution entirely. The same thing I would say, also on a coaching side and on the doctor's side. So we take that naturally extremely seriously, because that eventually is boiling down to our health outcomes, and those are what we stand our ground on. And initially, when our coaches used to talk to the patients or the doctors, the SOPs etc. were not so well refined, and even when the SOPs were refined, the adherence to those SOPs was not great. So again, we work really hard to make sure that the patient experience was at that center. And I'll tell you a small thing. About a year or so back, it used to take us. So when a person bought our care program, a care program is basically like a subscription program, and you would get access to the doctors, you would get access to the coach, you would get all your medication, etc. And it's a full blown program management of the individual for a span of 3, 6, or 12 months. Now, when a person bought that program, by the time, so typically the SOP had, hey, you get buy the program, you talk to the coach, you talk to the doctor, you get your medicines. By the time the person talked to a doctor was 8 days. By the time he received his first medication was 15 days from the time he had bought. So you can imagine he paid 12, 15 grand, and then it was taking 15 days for the first service, and we were up knocking on his door for renewals right on the day of 3 months when the sale had happened. So we realized that there were some simple problems to solve, somewhat more difficult problems to solve, but they were all ops problems. So earlier, what we used to do was there used to be a relationship manager calling, then after that the coach calling, and then the doctor getting on a call, etc., etc. We squeezed everything. We allocated these automatically. We matched basically patient profile to the coach and to the doc. We built an algorithm, and instantly when a sale happened, the coach and doctor were allocated. Now, from that 15 day of medicine delivery, we deliver medicines in 3 days. From that 8 day of doctor consultation, it happens within 24 hours of you having bought the program. And it is only so we always had the tech, but we didn't use the tech to drive customer experience and customer experience through an ops efficiency. So I think those are two examples, which I can take, one from the product side, one from the service side that we had. And that is one of the reasons, whether it is customer satisfaction. See, NPS and customer satisfaction are always, or your these ratings on Amazon are always going to be the output of that engine or the control system, as you know, some of you may be engineers here. But there are lots of inputs that go into it, and then the output is what it is. It is an outcome or an output. But I think as founders, it is very easy for us to forget about the inputs and obsess ourselves with the output. And yes, while we should, but inputs are actually what will get us to the output, and the right inputs will get us to the output. And hence an NPS. Now we enjoy great NPS, we enjoy great customer satisfaction, but it's not because we wished for it. We did wish for it. For a few years, we continued to wish for it, but didn't work towards it. But now we wish for it, but work towards it proactively, and fortunately, we've achieved many of those.
Awesome. I think this entire attitude of worrying about what are the correct inputs that you should focus on, and really take a look at, and that's what you use to drive your outputs on the customer experience entire journey of it. That's, I think, something that a lot of companies miss. Like, what are the exact areas that we should be looking for? Like, where are we getting those essential customer feedbacks from? Is it going to be through Amazon? Is it going to be through, let's say, angry emails from customers? Where is it that you look for, right? So I understand that at BeatO, you have also been through an entire journey for this, where initially you, as you were saying, that customer feedback, customer experience wasn't an entire focus of it. But then
Yeah.
you started realizing that the better the customer experience is, and the better your ops is, arranged around it and catering to it, the better your health outcomes is. Because if your patients or customers, they have those strips ready, they won't be frugal about it, they won't skip a day of testing, you will have better real time data. So as a result, you'll basically give them better treatment and better service, essentially. So when you talk about this customer feedback, the input part of it, how do you go about how did you go about building this for BeatO, right? Where did you understand that this is where I will get my meat of customer feedback from? what was your approach in that, and how were you measuring the entire customer feedback around it? If you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, so it's basically a culmination of a you need to know that you're not perfect, or you need to start acknowledging that you're not perfect. So as founders, we are eternally optimistic, and we seem to think that what we are doing is the best thing, and maybe the customer doesn't know about it. And that's sometimes the case, but mostly what the customer's telling you is is writing on the wall. And if we choose to ignore it for whatever reason, sooner than later it will come back to bite us only. So we keep all channels. I think that's the most relevant thing. I think customer, we roll out anything or we do anything, and if the customer is not happy with it, we need to go back to the drawing table and figure out why it is the case. And that of course starts telling into all business metrics, if not now, then in a few months time. And for us, of course, we have a great team, of customer experience. We across all channels, whether this be social media, whether this be our app. So we capture a lot of NPS information from the app itself, customer satisfaction around monitoring. We capture customer satisfaction for our doctors. We capture customer satisfaction for our coaches on multiple aspects. So these are what the customers telling us, and then we audit ourselves on customer experience as well. So we have a strong both audit team, as well as now we started to use some AI tools to help us fasten that, because some of our, for example, the coach calls last for 30 minutes now. That creates a little bit of a bottleneck if there is an individual doing the audit. So there we're using some tools that are available in the market. And these allow us a combination of these things. So if an email comes to me, I never ignore it. Now fortunately I don't get too many, but when it does, I think that's really the alarm bells, because if it has come to me, that means there's something really wrong. Or we've troubled the patient so much that they nobody wants. It's everybody's living in a busy world. If a product they paid for, or a service they paid for, performs that the way it should, I don't think they're really perturbed of reaching out to you unnecessarily. They're not doing it for the heck of it. Of course, it is true that happy customers will seldom tell you. The unhappy customers will tell you a lot more. But that's why I think, while so one is a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy. If I surround myself with just the happy customers, it won't help my cause. So I at least make sure that if even there is an iota bit of, even if there's one customer, let's say last week, we have about 20 odd doctors, and we look at even the doctors customer satisfaction scores. But even if there is one dissatisfaction, or like a score that says one customer was dissatisfied with this doctor, we don't take that lightly as a feedback. We go, for instance, myself, Dr. Navneet, who's our chief clinical officer, Rohit knows him well. We listen to that whole call. There aren't too many, which allows us that bandwidth to do it ourselves. And then we counsel the doctor if there was genuinely a challenge there, right? So it is, I think it also stems from the top a little bit, if especially if you're a little large organization. I mean, when it was very early on, then everybody could focus on this. But if I don't honestly believe and work towards customer experience and look at, it's a little bit leading by example. If Dr. Navneet didn't care about the fact that he said ये patient ही ऐसे होते हैं, यू नो उनको समझ नहीं आता है, डॉक्टर तो अच्छा बोल रहा था, बट पेशेंट ही ठीक नहीं है. अब पेशेंट ठीक नहीं है का क्या मतलब है? मतलब हम लोगों ने उसको कुछ चैलेंज दिया ना. So that's how at least I approach it. The second thing is, with tech, I've had this challenge lots of time, and we have this friendly banter now with Kunal, who's my co-founder and CTO too. But uh, for his team at times, so they will build a feature, and they will build it as a functional for functional work. But it's very difficult for a tech person to acknowledge that what the customer is saying is not right, is correct, and that feature or whatever functional UI they may have built is not the right one. So just acknowledging and accepting that if there is a problem, let me first be Sherlock Holmes on myself, then on the customer. I think that attitude is extremely important for most people in the top, and then it percolates down, and then you can build your systems around it, like we have tried to build. So we are very proactive. So we don't just, for example, look at कि Amazon पे कितना sale हुआ. We look at the comments, we look at the reviews, we look at our BSRs, and then we also look at कि scale हुआ कि नहीं हुआ. Or there are different issues, like at times, of course, one of the other competitors may market hell of a lot, and then our, from BSR 3 or 4 we may have followed, bestseller rank we may have followed. But the other attributes we know. So what is controllable by us, we focus on that. What we can't control, we can't control. I mean, and now, at least on the digital business, we've understood some of those things very well. On the clinics and the physical side, we are still learning. So we don't know certain things, and we can anticipate and accept only a few. But then over the course of the next year or two, we'll figure out more or less every variable that is there that impacts customer experience. And potentially we may have solved it, otherwise we may be in the process of solving. But at least in the digital core, to a large extent, we figured out what those variables are, and we keep a view, very solid, strong view on those. And even if there is one or two of those issues, so this calling thing, which I was telling you earlier, we had like maybe 100, over 100 DNDs in a month at that time. Now last month there was one. बट इट्स नॉट लाइक वी गिवन अप कि अब हम लोग देखते नहीं है, क्योंकि पिछले काफी महीनों से 1 या 2 आ रहा है. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि वो डेटा नहीं देखते हम लोग, हमें वो देखना है. मतलब कभी नहीं पता कि फिर से वो 2 या 3 या 4 5 कैसे बढ़ जाए. So even if it is one, we take a conscious view on it. And why was that one also there? Of course, then it's a law of probability. You can't just achieve 100% compliance on everything.
That's amazing. I think having this rigor that pursuing every last bit of issues that the customer has and trying to solve for it, I think that rigor is something that's truly essential to driving great customer experience, right? Here I would like to ask one last question on the customer experience front. That is, you as a founder, and as well as some of the teams that you're working with, like the customer experience team, all of you would be very, very serious about the customer experience that you're delivering. Right? So, because this is something that you know the importance of, and you know how much of an impact it has on the business. But let's say there are other patient touchpoints or customer touchpoints that you have by different teams, right? Your coach is talking to the customers, your doctors are talking to the customers, there are other people reaching out and asking questions with the customers. So, how do you bring about a culture in the organization across functions who don't really care about customer experience much, but they have to, because that's the entire service that you're giving. Your customers should feel they are valued by every single point of your touch point of your organization. How do you bring this culture to the org, and how do you like coach people, or how do you lead people to drive customer experience? If you could talk about that a bit.
No, it's a great point, and it takes a bit of time. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of consistency also from the management side to keep harping on that in terms of importance. I'll take, like you mentioned about the coach, and I'll give you those examples out of BeatO too. So so the coaches at some point in time were responsible for renewal of the programs. And then we said, okay, because now there are various other things that the patient needs, and we introduced the protein and some of the other things, ancillary products. The coaches are also responsible for selling these products. And by the way, if there is a short-term program, they are also responsible for upgrading them on a long-term program. So the coach who is accountable for health outcomes, who is responsible for driving patient engagement and retention, also had a major revenue responsibility. So while we did this, we also changed the way we track coaches. This was a while back. And we said the coaches' incentives and whatever else is. So we started looking at revenue and retention first. And then maybe if there was time in an hour-long meeting, we focused on engagement, right? And then the coaches' incentive programs, or however those variables, etc., had a a bigger chunk of, if you do retention and if you do your renewals and you bring in this revenue, then that occupied 70-80% of your KRA, and then 20-30% was. So you incentivized and you ordered the priority to be an outcome, which I was talking to you earlier. Of course, as business people and as investors that Rohit and some of you other people are, you want that revenue outcome. But we can't pass and filter all of that to the teams, right? And so if the coaches start behaving like a salesperson, which they are or they were, then what gets compromised? They are more interested in calling the next customer for a renewal rather than talking to them about their health, right? Sooner than later, while initially it will give you great results, and it did give us great results, but over a period of time, it does two things. One, it starts to frustrate the coaches themselves, right? Because they didn't sign up for this. This is not their core competency. We have trained them in this, and they've become really good, and now they're passionate also, because we always link and say, देखो, अगर आप अच्छी केयर दे रहे हो तो फिर इसका मतलब रेन्यू तो आई जाना चाहिए, तो आपकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है. But it was always, it's something that is set as an agenda by us. It is set as an incentive program by us, as a motivation by us, and then over time the team does the right or the wrong thing accordingly. Now of late, like I was telling you, I mean, many things in BeatO have undergone significant alteration, and the way we approach things over the last few years. But on the coach, we changed it, and we realized it fortunately soon enough, that things were breaking as we were scaling. And we reorganized the structure of the organization. We said, okay, the coach is responsible for engagement and driving this. You can take on a few more customers, but just focus on making sure that you're engaging well with them. You're bringing, solving problems around their health, not around their transaction. And then we created a separate small revenue vertical, but these people were interacting with the team leaders of the coaches, right? So the renewal was still the responsibility of the team lead, but we said that's a byproduct if your outcome is being brought in. We changed the incentive program to now say 70-80% is driven through your engagement and health outcomes, and then 20-30% renewals. And our also the third part, which is our view and management reviews that we do with the team leaders, with the head of department, etc., also changed in terms of how we split the bandwidth of that review. So if it is an hour long, we want to start out with the inputs. We want to start out with, okay, these are the coaches. This is what the customer satisfaction of the coaches was. This is their SLA. Did they meet those SLAs? This was their audit report in terms of the quality and science of what they're delivering. Who is less, who is more here, and then we don't miss out on revenue. We do come back to the revenue, but then the headache of that revenue is of course reduced, because if we are doing all these things better, we haven't. But in fact, we've seen the revenues only go up, and a slightly happier environment with the team, because their roles and responsibilities are better defined. And again, to your point, different parts of the organizations, their incentives, their alignment, their work and roles will function slightly differently. This, I took the example of the coaching team. The sales team might be different, logistics may be different, but eventually designing for the org, and then making sure you as a management team is consistent with that message, and don't just flip flop and say कि नहीं अच्छा अब हो गए 2 महीने और हम लोग कस्टमर एंगेजमेंट पे बात कर रहे थे, वापस सबको चेंज होकर रेवेन्यू पे बात करते हैं. वो नहीं हो सकता.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this, Gautam. I remember when I was at P&G, our plant manager used to keep instilling this concept in all of us young managers. We were managing teams of people who were working in the shop floor of the plant, that an organization delivers the outcomes that it is designed to deliver, right? That there are no accidents, fundamentally speaking, right? If you, for example, on the shop floor only talk about production as the first thing and the last thing in the meeting, and you make safety a footnote, then that's how people on the shop floor are going to behave. And over a period of time, somebody is going to get hurt. Whereas if you start the conversation and end the conversation with safety, right? Production will still happen, right? But people will also be safe. So I see like massive parallels with what you just said here, right? About messaging, about consistency of messaging, and about designing organization and incentives in the right way, right? So that you ultimately get the outcome that you want. Switching gears a little bit, right? Now talking maybe a little bit about numbers, about revenue, about profits, maybe even about fundraising. A couple of questions, from my side to sort of round out this amazing call that we've had so far. So one is when you sort of think about ops, right? Like one of the perspectives that people often have with regards to ops is that it's about, say, cutting cost or it's about maintenance of the business as usual. Could you maybe share a little bit of your perspective on how ops works towards driving, non-linearity in revenue? Right? Like, how can you leverage ops to like make revenue generation something that's really, really scalable? You tell us a little bit about, the innovations that you did maybe on the glucometer to sort of make things simpler. So like, you leverage ops, you make things simple, simplicity scales revenue. Some examples, right, around how ops was used to drive revenue.
Yeah, so I think this point is extremely important and relevant for every business. I think more definitely in a healthcare oriented business which is not transaction, which is like a long term association we need to build with the patient, especially in the space of diabetes or any chronic condition. So I think, see, if you just look at it, what is our world? If you break it down into business, it's LTV and CAC from a investor or founder perspective. And it took me some time to learn this initially because startups was still a recent concept, but for many of you, those terms are very, very familiar. Now, which of these two is important? Now you can debate depending on the business, but in my view, for the business that we're in, LTV is extremely critical. And LTV is a function of what? LTV is a function of the retention and the life that a customer will have with you, and then the value in terms of transactions that they're making over a period of time. That is being delivered to the ecosystem. And Rohit talked about compounding, right? So maximizing returns. So LTV, if your retentions are really good and your transactions are coming, you will not need as many customers, but your revenues will keep compounding, and that's what annuity businesses are all about, right? So you acquire one, and then for several years this one person will keep giving you revenues, and then you'll keep acquiring people, but then that compounding in terms of revenues and monetization and eventual output will take place. So when I look at the differentiator, and yes, product tech is all extremely crucial because they're fueling all this. But what I've noticed is, especially in a healthcare business, and I've seen aviation closely, where ops makes hell of a lot of difference. I think Indigo is a great example. You guys have seen. You forget about what's have been happening of late, but in general, I think their ops efficiency, focus on ops, led them to develop a customer loyalty, led them to develop, of course, a great business. And I see the same for us also, because ops plays a significant role in driving customer retention and helping us to be able to build that trust consistency so people can keep transacting on various aspects on the platform. If I just tell you the results, I talked about a lot of the things that we were doing not that well, to a situation now where I would say many of those things are solved, but still in the process of solving several other things. We've increased our LTV by 2.5 to 3 times, right? So and we're talking of still the same patient quality that we used to attract at that time with whatever we had. But what we also did, so while we did that, where you talked about the monitoring, I talked about the monitoring, I talked about the coaching improvements, I talked about the overall app consistency, etc. Our ability to service both on the product side in terms of delivery of things within a few days, to our ensuring the SOPs of the coaches and everything were great, so that we can deliver both customer great customer experience and consistency. Uh, that had a positive impact on existing customer base in increasing their LTV to 2.5 3x. But what it also did was reduce our CAC. And what it also did was increase our scale of new customer acquisitions. What it also did was help us increase our price. So I'll give you an example. Rohit, while Rohit was helping us at BeatO, even then, I think about a year or so back, Rohit, if I'm not mistaken, uh, our only lever to scale was drop the price of the device on Amazon or anywhere else, right? But because we had worked on this, we have now started commanding a better price. So if we had gone to the extent of giving our kit on Amazon etc. to 199 rupees, now we are at a 500 550 level, and no, we haven't done that by reducing scale. We have increased scale by 2x, right? So LTV was a great outcome because of delivering solid, consistent experience by changing a lot of things on the ops side for the business. But we also got tailwinds of doing that on our new customer acquisition because we started to command higher price, which meant higher contribution margins. We started reducing our CAC, which meant reduced cost, or one of the largest costs that most digital businesses have these days. And it allowed us to increase our scale, which is a combination of these two things. So overall LTV CAC relationship, LTV going up, CAC going down, scale going up, that's the holy grail of the business, right? And if I look at anything that changed, it was a clear focus and hard, I would say consistent execution on what? On ensuring customer experience, long term thinking delivered through a better operational excellence that we earlier were ignoring, or we didn't have the muscle for.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think this was like a great sort of way to put it, right? Like LTV, CAC, scale, all coming together in the right way is what helps businesses drive, non-linearity, right? Fundamentally, it expands your margins, it expands your scale, and it makes everything that you were doing easier to do more of, right? I think on that note, and probably the last question before we maybe ask the audience if they would want to raise their hands, ask any questions over here, is you've raised capital from various investors over a long period of time at different stages of the journey, right? When ops was great, when ops was information, when ops was not a focus, you've seen the entire journey, you've seen how people interact, how easy, how difficult it was at all of these points of time to raise capital, right? Could you tell us a little bit about what role the operational design of your business has in convincing investors that you're going to be effective, you're going to succeed, and that you're a company that they should consider investing? Of course, there's various aspects around IP, around product, around tech, which are enormously important across all sorts of businesses, right? But given that here in healthcare, ops forms such a core component of the business, and that ops is not incidental, but rather the core of the business, how do you think about communicating this aspect to investors? Why do investors care? And how should maybe some of the folks who are on the call, who are founders, who are working in teams that are trying to raise capital, how should they think about communicating the operational effectiveness of the businesses to investors?
See, you're also as good as the investors you attract. So I believe, investors love product market fit. All investors, most investors love product market fit. I think the best ones also love operations market fit. And ops market fit for us is as important as a product market fit. So, I think the journey, and also for the overall startup ecosystem, I think we are going through, we're just about a decade or a little over old, right? 15 years old, where startups and ecosystem with VCs, etc., started to take prominence. We've grown as a country, as a nation, very solidly. And hence, while as founders, we are learning a lot of things about our businesses, I think the investors are learning several things about their own portfolio companies. And increasingly, I see, especially for not so early stage, but I would say the next level as a Series B or beyond, uh, in terms of, let's say, the scale that people have achieved, operations is becoming the differentiator. So the smart investors and most of them who really mean serious business, who will be with you for a long term, want to see the founders focus on operations as much as other parts of the business. Because you've seen so many examples of big companies, unicorns, etc., as we call them, falter because of operations. And like I said in the beginning, you can't scale chaos anymore. The appetite for investors has also changed. Gone are the days where you could just splurge a lot of capital and think of solving as you go. So there are certain things which are core you must address and solve for to begin with, and then you start scaling, and then the capital also flows much more seamlessly. It is never going to be easy. I think in healthcare, whether it was when we started or even now, I think it's been really tough for anybody to raise capital. It's not. See, also it's a little unforgiving in the sense when we talk about customer experience on operations. You could have, so I mean, quick commerce done tremendously well. It's a very highly intensive, operational intensive business, but if something doesn't reach you, or there is a, I don't know, let's say a cabbage that reaches you which is spoiled, uh, that is less of a concern than, let's say, in your healthcare business, a wrong advice or wrong medication is given to a person, and then that can contribute to a fatal outcome. So I think the stakes are different in terms of what ops means. Of course, if Zepto or whoever continues to falter and keep sending you bad cabbage all the time, you will lose trust and you won't opt for their services. But in healthcare, you don't get too many chances. You get only a few, and hence I think the investors realize that also. And so the good ones, the serious ones, which I would say now most of them do, they understand the importance of ops fit as much as product market fit.
Awesome. I think I could really relate to the last part where in the healthcare sphere, it's really, really important to get your ops right because one small mistake can lead to a big medical legal case that might potentially do it in your entire brand, whatever you've been building for the last few years. That would all just come crashing down just because of one mistake. So yeah, so I can totally understand that, and I think that's something very crucial to consider. And I think with that, we have got a lot of insights from you. Today's call, a lot of different topics that we covered. We spoke about, what it is that ops is, what ops is in the case of BeatO, in the case of healthcare, in the case of a digital health company, how it is important. We also spoke up at length about the customer experience, how it's driven at the core by ops, as well as we spoke about the non-linear growth that ops delivers, in the revenue and the growth side of things. So I think that's we got to learn a lot. Before we end this call and have our takeaways for this session, I think we ask all of our speakers this question before we end: is that you have learned from your entire journey, or you might have referred to some other pieces of advice that you might have seen throughout your career, right? Whether it be advice from mentors, whether it be some certain pieces of knowledge, some books that you might have read that have really helped you. So if you were to give the folks here on the call a bit of insights or a bit of advice before we part on how it is that they could further their learning on the of becoming a better ops leader. So if that's something that you could talk about a bit, kind of wrap up.
Yeah, so I mean, there are so many learnings from so many people from so many books, but when it comes to ops, and at least what I keep harping to our teams about, and I don't know if I don't think it is a quote anywhere, but I just put a few words together which I at least believe resonate well with the team, and it's simple enough. Great things happen when small things are done tirelessly, right? So there's no overnight success, and we've seen everywhere, but you need to keep doing those small things tirelessly in favor of, let's say, in our conversation, of the customer, to eventually then unlock all of this. So there is, I mean, if you're, some of you might be, cooking and enjoy making food. I do. Uh, there are a set of ingredients you can't miss out on. If you want to get the best dish out, you can't miss out on the right ingredients. You can't miss out on the quality of the right ingredients. You can't miss out on the steps of the recipe, and you will get your cake eventually. But every small thing that you put together to be able to then enjoy that cake, uh, the cake is only as good as what you put in it, and the steps you follow to be able to make that cake. So I think eventually, like I said, I think great things happen, but they only happen if the small things are done right and small things are done tirelessly. And I think as ops leaders, as you guys are, getting into learning more about, specializing in ops, uh, these are recipes you are making or going to make for your own businesses or for, the businesses that you're working or will work with. But there is no, I have never seen that of course there would be instances there is one big thing that would change the course of events, but typically, mostly, high probability, there are small little things that when they come together, they give you the grand outcome. So I think I at least follow that. Our team follows mostly that, and hopefully that works for you guys too.
That's amazing advice. I can totally understand. It's the bits and pieces that you put together over the entire course and doing that diligently and doing that well. That's what leads to the bigger outcome. So
Yeah. See,
that's
I see my kids playing Lego, and I get reminded of that every day. So, so it's a simple thing about everything that you put in life, right? So you're working out. Um, you can't just run one day for 10 kilometers at whatever speed. Done sustainably over a long period of time, I think continuity is also important.
awesome.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you so much, Gautam, for
It was a
spending
pleasure.
the time with us and for doing this session. I think with that, we're all out of questions for today. We'll let you and everybody else on this call get back to their Sundays, and we are very, very glad, that everyone could make the time to do this. Thank you, everybody who spent the time with us with Gautam here on a Sunday morning, joined this session. Hopefully you all found it helpful, right? These concepts, these principles that Gautam was able to share on his journey building BeatO. And Gautam, as always, this was a session I've wanted to do ever since Rohito and I started Ops Matters. And I am incredibly glad that we were able to finally do it today and to hear you just talk about all of these different experiences and about BeatO as a company and as a business that's helping people across the country at this point of time. Thank you. Awesome.
Been a pleasure to see you guys again. All the best.
you so
Thank
much,
you.
Gautam.
Take
Take
care.
care. Bye bye.
Take
And
care.